Elder Price, and I would like to share with you the most amazing book. Hello, my name is Elder Grant. It's a book about America a long, long time ago. It has so many awesome parts, you simply won't believe how much this book can change your life. Hello, my name is Elder Green. I would like to share with you this book of Jesus Christ. Hello, my name is Elder Young. Hello, did you know that Jesus lived here in the USA? You can read all about it now. Hello, in this nifty book, it's free. No, you don't have to pay. Hello, hello. My name is Elder Smith, and can I leave this book with you for you to just peruse?
Hello, my name is Doug Bundy, formerly known as Elder Bundy, as a young missionary, but here is your host on Voices from the Dust TV for this Thursday, the 11th day of September 2014, 9/11. We welcome you to our show where we share the reason for the hope within us, the reason why the Latter-day Saints are Christians, and also the reason why you should be too. Our message not only distinguishes what the difference between LDS doctrine and non-LDS doctrine, but also why we declare, the Latter-day Saints have declared since 1845, that the only salvation remaining for the Gentiles is for them to repent, to be baptized, and to, of course, be identified in the same covenant and to worship at the same altar as Israel. It's like getting on the Ark of Noah. We have discussed this in past episodes of Voices from the Dust, and you can find those on our website, voicesfromthedust.org. That's voicesfromthedust.org. Just go there, click on the menu item TV, and you can watch the program live on our website, or there are links to YouTube channel, our Google Plus page, our Facebook page, all entitled Voices from the Dust. Okay, well, that's our one and only little commercial that we have, where we really do welcome everybody on this historic day, and hopefully we're going to be able to talk a little bit about it. Yesterday, well, remember, we've introduced these themes for each day of the week. On Monday, we talk about the controversies of Zion. On Tuesday, we talk about the truths of Zion. On Wednesday, the land of Zion. And on Thursdays, the enemies of Zion. And on Friday, the prophets of Zion. So today is the enemies of Zion, and we're talking about September 11th, which is, of course, very illustrative of who are our enemies. On the first episode 2 weeks ago, we talked about Lucifer and especially Isaiah chapter 14 and the pre-existent battle that went on. And then we also talked about the following week, which was a week ago, about the secret combinations that he has convinced men to enter into since the days of Cain, telling them not to believe in the plan of salvation in Jesus Christ, but he had a better way, and many of them followed him and loved him more than God, and have ever since. So that's the foundation of what we see today. But we have our guest today, a voice of warning there from Andrew and my brother Roy. And so we want to welcome these guys. Say hello to the folks out there. And if you want, tell us what you were doing during 9/11 when you heard about it. And that would be very interesting to know.
All right. I will go first. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
All right, good stuff. So, yeah, I was at college. I was probably 18. I was attending Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And I was sitting there in class, and I was probably just, like, thinking about, some TV show and probably just mindless, thinking about some girl or something. And then they said, oh, there's an attack on the building. And I was like, oh, can we go home? And they're like, yeah. I was like, all right, cool, see ya. And then I looked at the news after that, and I just believed the narrative, and I said, let's go get them. Let's go kill some people, right? I was bloodthirsty. So that's it.
Oh, that's how many do you think experienced the same thing as you did? How many 18-year-olds probably had that same reaction?
Oh, I mean, it's got to be in America. It's got to be 99. I mean, I can't. It's got to be 100%. I mean, 99.98%.
None of us. Well, actually, there were a few that were awake. Alex Jones actually predicted it. And so he said back in July, and I think others, there's some controversy about that. There were others also, maybe before him, that were talking about it, or that enabled him to know. But he amazed everybody, because in July he was doing like he does when his spidey sense, goes off. It's something's coming down, and so we ought to play that clip, but I forgot about that.
The guy that predicted it before Alex Jones, that people say that he stole it from whatever, was Bill Cooper.
Oh yeah.
And Bill Cooper was able to see that CNN got into Osama bin Laden's hideout, but the CIA couldn't. And then he predicted it from there.
But he died, huh? It's funny how it's a dangerous occupation to be investigating this stuff. Okay, well, what about you, Roy? Where were you on 9/11?
I was working on a apartment complex.
We'd like to see your picture once. I mean, your image once in a while instead of your picture.
I'm cooking. Okay.
Well, so we could still like to see you.
Okay. I'm here.
There he is.
Yeah, and I was at 9/11. My twin brother and we were working on. We had a project that I had my construction company, and we were working on an apartment building, 22 units, putting new roofs on 3 buildings. So we were putting on. There was a flat roofs, but we ended up putting, pitch on them and everything like that. So we were putting new roof above them. So anyway, that's what we were doing. And then Bob came to me and said, "We've got we have a." He said they've attacked. We've been attacked or something. And so we found out what was going on. We took a break and then we went back to work after that. We couldn't do anything about it.
No, but then you probably went home and watched it on the news.
Oh
right?
Yeah, we went home. Eventually, we went home and watched it.
Of course, that was the only thing on, right? I mean, even Jay Leno didn't come on that night.
Oh, he didn't?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, they're on all the channels. There was nothing but what had happened, 9/11, and retracing it, and they couldn't control the story right out of the gate. See, some like what's his face? Oh gosh, see, there's my senior moments. I can't remember. Dan Rather.
Yeah,
Dan Rather was saying, "Wow, these buildings look just like what we've seen so many times before in Las Vegas. It looks like they're being demolished." Of course, they didn't replay that very often, but the other stuff they replayed over and over and over.
Yeah, people say that if you're looking out for a false flag, or you're looking out for these things to happen, you got to find out what they say right away, because not all these reporters are on the inside.
That's right. Yeah, that's so true. You find that with Sandy Hook and with Columbine, all kinds of false flags. Well, anyway, what we have here today is interesting. We'll probably better get on it, or we'll have a 3-hour show. But I could talk about this all day long, and the things that happened. We could play clips, very interesting clips from the from back the day it happened. and so on, and maybe we'll play some of those. But today's Whisper Out of the Ground is taken from chapter 19 of the book of Alma, and that's Whispers Out of the Ground is what we call chapters of the Book of Mormon here, and it's in connection with Alma chapter 29. We're going to look at how that was fulfilled, and there's some very interesting things to talk about regarding a new book that came out that supposedly proves that the Book of Mormon was plagiarized from the Bible and so on. But we just don't have time. But we're going to play again chapter 19 of Alma. That's our Whisper Out of the Ground in the Book of Mormon, Alma 19. And we will share it here so that you can see it, or you can follow along in your own scriptures. But we're going to play the professional recording as we follow the text.
And it came to pass that after 2 days and 2 nights they were about to take his body and lay it in a sepulchre which they had made for the purpose of burying their dead. Now the queen, having heard of the fame of Ammon, therefore she sent and desired that he should come in unto her. And it came to pass that Ammon did as he was commanded, and went in unto the queen, and desired to know what she would that he should do. And she said unto him, The servants of my husband have made it known unto me that thou art a prophet of a holy God, and that thou hast power to do many mighty works in his name. Therefore, if this is the case, I would that ye should go in and see my husband, for he has been laid upon his bed for the space of 2 days and 2 nights, and some say that he is not dead, but others say that he is dead, and that he stinketh, and that he ought to be placed in the sepulchre. But as for myself, to me he doth not stink. Now this was what Ammon desired, for he knew that King Lamoni was under the power of God. He knew that the dark veil of unbelief was being cast away from his mind, and the light which did light up his mind, which was the light of the glory of God, which was the marvelous light of his goodness, yea, this light had infused such joy into his soul, the cloud of darkness having been dispelled, and that the light of everlasting life was lit up in his soul, yea, he knew that this had overcome his natural frame, and he was carried away in God. Therefore what the queen desired of him was his only desire. Therefore he went in to see the king according as the queen had desired him. And he saw the king, and he knew that he was not dead. And he said unto the queen, He is not dead, but he sleepeth in God, and on the morrow he shall rise again, therefore bury him not. And Ammon said unto her, Believest thou this? And she said unto him, I have had no witness save thy word, and the word of our servants. Nevertheless, I believe that it shall be according as thou hast said. And Ammon said unto her, Blessed art thou because of thy exceeding faith. I say unto thee, woman, there has not been such great faith among all the people of the Nephites. And it came to pass that she watched over the bed of her husband from that time even until that time on the morrow which Ammon had appointed that he should rise. And it came to pass that he arose, according to the words of Ammon. And as he arose, he stretched forth his hand unto the woman, and said, Blessed be the name of God, and blessed art thou. For as sure as thou livest, behold, I have seen my Redeemer. And he shall come forth and be born of a woman, and he shall redeem all mankind who believe on his name. Now when he had said these words, his heart was swollen within him, and he sunk again with joy. And the queen also sunk down, being overpowered by the Spirit. Now Ammon, seeing the Spirit of the Lord poured out according to his prayers upon the Lamanites his brethren, who had been the cause of so much mourning among the Nephites, or among all the people of God, because of their iniquities and their traditions, he fell upon his knees, and began to pour out his soul in prayer and thanksgiving to God for what he had done for his brethren. And he was also overpowered with joy, and thus they all three had sunk to the earth. Now when the servants of the king had seen that they had fallen, they also began to cry unto God, for the fear of the Lord had come upon them also. For it was they who had stood before the king and testified unto him concerning the great power of Ammon. It came to pass that they did call on the name of the Lord in their might, even until they had all fallen to the earth, save it were one of the Lamanitish women, whose name was Abish, she having been converted unto the Lord for many years on account of a remarkable vision of her father. Thus, having been converted to the Lord, and never having made it known, therefore, when she saw that all the servants of Lamoni had fallen to the earth, and also her mistress the queen, and the king, and Ammon lay prostrate upon the earth, she knew that it was the power of God. And supposing that this opportunity, by making known unto the people what had happened among them, that by beholding this scene it would cause them to believe in the power of God, therefore she ran forth from house to house, making it known unto the people. And they began to assemble themselves together unto the house of the king. And there came a multitude, and to their astonishment they beheld the king and the queen and their servants prostrate upon the earth. And they all lay there as though they were dead. And they also saw Ammon, and behold, he was a Nephite. Now the people began to murmur among themselves, some saying that it was a great evil that had come upon them, or upon the king and his house, because he had suffered that the Nephite should remain in the land. But others rebuked them, saying, The king hath brought this evil upon his house, because he slew his servants who had had their flocks scattered at the waters of Sebus. And they were also rebuked by those men who had stood at the waters of Sebus, and scattered the flocks which belonged to the king. For they were angry with Ammon because of the number which he had slain of their brethren at the waters of Sebus, while defending the flocks of the king. Now one of them, whose brother had been slain with the sword of Ammon, being exceedingly angry with Ammon, drew his sword and went forth that he might let it fall upon Ammon to slay him. And as he lifted the sword to smite him, behold, he fell dead. Now we see that Ammon could not be slain, for the Lord had said unto Mosiah his father, I will spare him, and it shall be unto him according to thy faith. Therefore Mosiah trusted him unto the Lord. And it came to pass that when the multitude beheld that the man had fallen dead, who lifted the sword to slay Ammon, fear came upon them all, and they durst not put forth their hands to touch him or any of those who had fallen. And they began to marvel again among themselves what could be the cause of this great power, or what all these things could mean. And it came to pass that there were many among them who said that Ammon was the Great Spirit, and others said he was sent by the Great Spirit. But others rebuked them all, saying that he was a monster who had been sent from the Nephites to torment them. And there were some who said that Ammon was sent by the Great Spirit to afflict them because of their iniquities, and that it was the Great Spirit that had always attended the Nephites, who had ever delivered them out of their hands. And they said that it was this Great Spirit who had destroyed so many of their brethren the Lamanites. And thus the contention began to be exceedingly sharp among them. And while they were thus contending, the woman servant who had caused the multitude to be gathered together came, and when she saw the contention which was among the multitude, she was exceedingly sorrowful, even unto tears. And it came to pass that she went and took the queen by the hand, that perhaps she might raise her from the ground. And as soon as she touched her hand, she arose and stood upon her feet, and cried with a loud voice, saying, O blessed Jesus, who has saved me from an awful hell! O blessed God, have mercy on this people. And when she had said this, she clasped her hands, being filled with joy, speaking many words which were not understood. And when she had done this, she took the king Lamoni by the hand, and behold, he arose and stood upon his feet. And he, immediately seeing the contention among his people, went forth and began to rebuke them, and to teach them the words which he had heard from the mouth of Ammon. And as many as heard his words believed, and were converted unto the Lord. But there were many among them who would not hear his words, therefore they went their way. And it came to pass that when Ammon arose, he also administered unto them, and also did all the servants of Lamoni. And they did all declare unto the people the selfsame thing, that their hearts had been changed, that they had no more desire to do evil. And behold, many did declare unto the people that they had seen angels, and had conversed with them. And thus they had told them things of God and of his righteousness. And it came to pass that there were many that did believe in their words. And as many as did believe were baptized. And they became a righteous people, and they did establish a church among them. And thus the work of the Lord did commence among the Lamanites. Thus the Lord did begin to pour out his Spirit upon them. And we see that his arm is extended to all people who will repent and believe on his name.
Wow. I always say wow at the end of these chapters. They're just so powerful. I don't know what to say. It's just you could spend a week on every verse here practically. It is just, to me, it's very, very moving. And To others, to many of us, we believe these words, just like at the time when it happened, there were those who believed, but there were those who would not believe, and that's the way it is today. There are those who believe it when they read it, and there are those that just dismiss it. Any comment from you guys?
Yeah, it's really powerful. It's amazing. The when it talks about, I love that right at the end, and the Lord did begin to pour out His Spirit. I mean, when you hear those words, pour out His Spirit, you can visualize it, and you can also feel it and get a sense of it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, He does, and He also says that He did establish a church among them. And so that's important. We understand that churches are of God, just as he says later on in 3rd Nephi that he would establish his church among all of us that believe these words that we're now reading. So, and he did. Amazing. Well, Roy's probably eating his breakfast there. But anyway, let's move on then to our next feature, which is did I not? Yeah, I shared that. Could you see the scriptures when we were reading them?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, because it looked like I forgot to click that button.
No,
all right,
good.
So here we are now with our awful situation. We call that our awful situation because of the warning that we receive in the Book of Mormon, and we'll be talking more about that. We've talked a lot about it on this show and in our past episodes, and we'll continue to talk about it. But anyway, in the website Voices from the Dust here, we have a page. It's called Our Awful Situation Update, and that page contains, and I didn't update it last night. There's so many things I should have done with it, but we keep it updated so that you can see many of the current events, and when I get it fixed, you'll be able to link to the background videos as well. But sometimes I get behind and things and don't remember what to do. But anyway, that is important for you to understand, because as it says, the Lord commands us to awaken to a sense of our awful situation. Well, many of us awoke on 9/11, and so what we want to do is play a clip for today that is a program that occurred a month ago or more, just a little more, but after 13 years, those who were investigating the truth of 9/11 were finally, after callers for 13 years have been asking, allowed to appear on C-SPAN and tell their story. Just the 1st of August is when this program was recorded. Do you have that queued up and ready to go, Andrew?
Yes, I do. Let's make sure that it pulls up. Okay, so this is the with Richard Gage, and he is a architect. I believe he's an architect, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
He's the head of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. It's been ongoing for a long time.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen here. And here we go. You seeing it?
Yes.
Okay.
And what do you have doubts about? Well, the architects and engineers that I represent have found evidence.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
It's coming out squiggly on my screen. There it is. Okay.
Okay, the volume's real low too. If we can get the volume up as high as possible.
With the 3rd high-rise that collapsed on that day, in the afternoon of 9/11, World Trade Center 7. We're looking forward to sharing with your viewers that evidence.
That's as loud as it goes.
Look at a little
Okay.
video your group has put out. You can explain it after we see it.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building. It's amazing.
That's Building 7.
Incredible that you were. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before. A building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite.
See, the volume's not coming through very well, but Dan Rather here is the one describing that about demolition.
And most Americans are completely unfamiliar with this. In fact, architects and engineers around the world, mostly all unfamiliar with the third worst structural failure in modern history. I mean, here is a 47-story skyscraper. At
Still hearing it?
5:20 in the afternoon.
Yeah, we're hearing it, but the video's gone now.
This fast. Free
Ah.
acceleration. Straight
He's
down,
talking about the free fall.
symmetrically. As
Yeah,
you
here,
saw.
let me play it on mine because the audio, which is the most important, will come through better.
Yeah.
Just
Right
pause
Sorry.
yours. Just pause it there so his picture shows,
Yep.
and I will play the video on my, I mean the audio on my end, so that we can hear it better because this is critical.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure why that volume. That's as loud as it goes. But this
Washington
guy,
Journal continues.
Oh, nice.
Now we want to introduce you to Richard Gage. He is the founder of a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Mr. Gage, what is that group?
We are a group of 2,200 architects and engineers, a nonprofit organization dedicated to finding out what really happened at the World Trade Center with the destruction of all 3 towers on that day.
And what do you have doubts about?
Well, the architects and engineers that I represent have found evidence that has not been told to the American people by the agencies tasked with explaining these, the destruction of these towers. Evidence of controlled demolition, particularly with the 3rd high-rise that collapsed on that day in the afternoon of 9/11, World Trade Center 7. We're looking forward to sharing with your viewers that evidence today.
Well, let's look at a little bit of video that your group has put out, and you can explain it after we see it.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building. It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Mr. Gage, that was Building 7, Dan Rather narrating on CBS Live.
It sure was, and most Americans are completely unfamiliar with this. In fact, architects and engineers around the world, mostly all unfamiliar with the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history. I mean, here is a 47-story skyscraper. At 5:20 in the afternoon, it drops like a rock, and I mean this fast. Free fall acceleration. Straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, as you saw. Now, a building with 40,000 tons of structural steel cannot fall straight down like we saw due to normal office fires, the official reason given us by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, without all 80 columns on each floor being removed simultaneously and then synchronistically timed floor by floor. So, Peter, we've seen this like the old hotels in Las Vegas, and as our viewers just saw, it looks exactly like a controlled demolition. But NIST tells us, no, this came down due to normal office fires. So you can begin to see the problem right off the bat. Normal office fires have never brought down a skyscraper ever before. we have steel-framed, fire-proofed skyscrapers for a very good reason. And they have protected our towers for a long, long time. So the 2,200 architects and engineers that I represent around the world in over 300 presentations now in 32 countries and 82 American cities, they present the evidence for the explosive demolition. And that evidence is seen not only in the videos of the buildings, but it's heard by the first responders who cite the explosions in this building's destruction, who cite the pools of molten iron flowing like lava, they say. And in fact, Leslie Robertson himself, the World Trade Center structural engineer, cites a river of steel flowing. Now, these are evidence of temperatures exceeding 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Office fires can't even get 1,000 degrees short of that. So we have a serious problem, very serious, in the accountability under the official story of those extremely high temperatures and evidence of molten iron, documented by FEMA itself in the first report, Appendix C, in the FEMA report, May of 2002, which documents hot sulfur corrosion. In fact, the author of that report, Jonathan Barnett, says the ends of the beams were partially evaporated. That takes 4,000 degree temperatures. The only thing that we're aware of that can create that is thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. And there are patented cutter charges that do just that with thermite. So this is why we have to have a real investigation that looks at the evidence that NIST has ejected from the report after they came in 2004 and threw away the FEMA report.
Now, Richard Gage, NIST is National Institute of Standards and Technology, is it? I believe?
That's correct. Yes.
You're talking about their report. Now, you question the falling of Building 7, the way it fell. Are you questioning how the Twin Towers fell as well?
There are very serious questions about the Twin Towers. Once we look at World Trade Center 7, which most people don't know anything about, and see how obvious the free-fall symmetrical destruction is, and how that matches exactly a controlled demolition, and how the official story cannot possibly be true, we're ready then, maybe, to take a look at the other subject that you bring up, the Twin Towers, with a little bit more of an open mind, because most of us feel like we know how the Twin Towers came down because we have been given the official story. Most architects and engineers don't even question the story that NIST has provided. When they do, however, see the evidence in the Twin Towers, like Building 7, they do end up agreeing with us by a show of hands, overwhelmingly, and many of them sign our petition. Again, 2,200 architects and engineers now demanding a real investigation. So that evidence is certainly available in the videos. For instance, of the North Tower, we're told that this upper block of 10 stories, 15 stories above the point of jet plane impacts in the North Tower, that upper block drove the rest of the building down to the ground. We have a few problems with this story, however. Chiefly, that's not what the videos show whatsoever. That upper portion is destroying itself before there's any downward motion to drive the rest of the building down to the ground. In the first 4 seconds, it's completely destroyed, liquefied, if you will. The structure is completely shattered. There's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down. And yet what we see after 4 seconds is exactly what the first responders are describing, hundreds of them, in the oral histories taken and documented by Thomas von Essen, the fire commissioner. They say, pop, 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 all the way around like a belt, all these explosions. They're describing explosions, they're hearing explosions, they're explosions throughout the building, yet none of these hundreds of eyewitness testimony of explosions are included in the official report. But what we see is, like they describe, a belt. All these explosions laterally driving 4-ton perimeter wall sections, structural steel sections, laterally 60 miles an hour in every direction, landing 600 feet away. Isolated, freely flying structural steel sections. This takes an incredible lateral force, up to enough force to eject or fire a 200-pound cannonball 3 miles. We also see explosions below that.
Mr. Gage, I apologize for interrupting. I just want to let our viewers know we're going to take a lot of phone calls, and we're going to begin that in just a second. We invited Mr. Gage on this program because from time to time regular viewers of the Journal know that we get phone calls asking about Building 7 regardless of what segment we're talking about. And so we thought we'd investigate this group and give them a chance to have their say. And I want to start with this tweet, Mr. Gage, and it kind of goes to the why. And this is Jim at Lake Gaston. Who gains from this building falling? Why would someone want to demolish it?
I think criminal investigators who were trained at looking for suspects in such massive criminal controlled demolitions like these obviously were, have to be employed to look at the means, the motive, and the opportunity. Who benefited? Cui bono? These are the questions that enterprising journalists and criminal investigators should be asking, but in large measure are not, for whatever reason. The architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are tasked with the what. And those questions you ask, why, have to also be answered by those who are trained to find suspects with motives and find the motive too.
Let's take some calls, Mr. Gage. Max in Milford, Indiana. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, C-SPAN, for having Mr. Gage on to tell the inconvenient truth about 9/11, because our whole foreign policy and much of our domestic policies today are all based on 9/11. And there are so many questions to be asked and answered about 9/11, like, where is the airplane debris at Shanksville, Pennsylvania? Where are the 4 black boxes from the airplanes? Why did the Bush administration fight an investigation? Why did the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 collapse? Why were military and political people told not to fly? Who scheduled the hijacking war games on 9/11? Where was NORAD? Who told them to stand down? These are just a few of the questions that need answering. Thank you.
Well, I agree with the caller. These are some serious and very important questions that Americans, millions of them, are asking, but not getting enough airtime. And we appreciate C-SPAN's dedication to journalism and finally focusing on this subject, because after all, 2 wars were started as a result of 9/11. We've lost 6,000 soldiers, 1 million people in the Middle East have been killed in these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've lost precious civil liberties through legislation, and our economy has been wrecked. If there's any question about what happened at the World Trade Center and the other questions the caller's asking about, then we've got to have a real investigation.
Richard Gage, next call for you comes from Alice in Morganville, New Jersey.
Hi, thank you. Everything you are saying is questions I have as somebody who worked there for 24 years and was there for the 93 incident. Nobody ever brings up Giuliani. We had Philippe Petit walked between the buildings, yet the mayor, the biggest mouth, never said after the first building was hit, clear out the second building. I don't care what size plane that they thought it was, or with the president reading My Pet Goat. So please continue to investigate. I lost so many dear friends. I wasn't working any longer at the Trade Center. Thank you.
Richard,
thank you. I do appreciate the additional questions raised by the callers today. Of course, our focus is on the science of what happened. We want to know, how did 400 structural steel connections give way every second during the 7-second free-fall collapse of World Trade Center 7? Their computer animation that NIST made to prove how their theory developed, that is the buckling of column number 79 at the 12th floor where the worst fires were said to be. However, those fires were burned out over an hour before the building ever collapsed. So they could not have caused the thermal expansion that NIST cites as initiating this collapse. NIST also has a serious problem in fabricating evidence and not including key structural components in their computer model, which they will not release, citing that it would jeopardize public safety were they to release the computer models and the structural drawings for Building 7. In fact, the architects and engineers like us who are responsible for public safety have to have this information, of course, in order to ensure that public safety.
Now, Richard Gage, National Institute of Standards and Technology, after their investigation of Building 7, put out a full report, and when you read it, it seems pretty frank and open. In fact, they ask themselves questions, or they ask the questions and then answer them, such as, is it possible that thermite or thermate created to the collapse of World Trade Center 7? Their answer in here is to apply thermite to a large steel column. Approximately 1.13 pounds of thermite would be needed to heat and melt each pound of steel. For a steel column that weighs approximately 1,000 pounds per foot, at least 100 pounds of thermite would need to be placed around the column, ignited, and remain in contact with the vertical steel surface as the thermite reaction took place. This is for one column. Presumably, more than one column would have been prepared with thermite if this approach were to be used. It is unlikely that 100 pounds of thermite or more could have been carried into World Trade Center 7 and placed around columns without being detected either prior to 9/11 or during that day.
Well, the question, one of them, would be who would be detecting this? Of course, we want an investigation of the security company under whose noses would have to have been brought several tons of thermite, as a matter of fact. Now, the question, the answer is quite cute, actually, because they completely ignore the patented thermite cutter charges, which issue thermite through a channeled device, issuing in milliseconds molten iron cutting through structural steel. This is very well documented, and you don't just pour thermite against a column. It has to be contained and directed in cutter charges. So we'd be looking for that evidence. In fact, what we see, what FEMA documents, is molten iron. In fact, molten concrete as well, which takes 3,000 degrees of temperature. Where does that come from? It can only come from thermite, an incendiary used by the military, again, to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So the evidence is there for thermite, and patented cutter charges are, in fact, made with consolidated thermite. All that would be left is molten iron. And indeed, that's what's found in the basements of the Twin Towers and the debris pile under World Trade Center 7, and it was not included in the official report by NIST, comprising 1,000 pages of obfuscation and actually lies.
Next call for Richard Gage. Eric, Antioch, California.
Hi, I'd just like to say that I really enjoy C-SPAN, and there's been a lot of callers a lot of times that I've heard calling about this issue, and I'd like to thank C-SPAN for allowing this to come up, and And congratulations to all the people's calls finally bringing it forward. And that's all I have to say.
We'll move on to Cologne, Germany. This is Sinan calling in from Cologne.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for taking my call, Mr. Gage. As we all know, there were many eyewitnesses, I call them crime scene witnesses, on that morning of 9/11. And indeed, it was one of the biggest crime scenes in history. I know you're not just only in contact with architects and engineers, but also with lawyers. What I want to know, once it comes for a new independent investigation, if it's just for Building 7 or all 3 buildings, would it be possible to consider such testimonies of, let me say, key eyewitnesses like Barry Jennings? As we all know, he survived the explosions in Building 7 even before any tower even did collapse. I mean, isn't it just a regular procedure to hear crime scene witnesses?
Yeah, there are several witnesses, in fact, hearing explosions. Barry Jennings is certainly one of them. Unfortunately, he lost his life the day before the final report came out about Building 7, in which, of course, they deny explosions, which he was testifying to in several different films and on live camera. We also have Kevin McPadden, a former Air Force medic who was a first responder, who actually heard a countdown, 3, 2, 1, and then felt explosions under his feet. He said it was like you needed to grab onto something. He knows an explosion when he hears it. Other firefighters or policemen hearing explosions. In fact, we have policemen moving people away from Building 7 saying, the building's about to blow up, flame and debris coming down. Now, how do they know the building is about to blow up? Fires, which there were a few small scattered fires in this building, which again have never brought down a skyscraper, steel frame ever. They're saying it's going to come down. They're expecting it to come down. In this case, they're expecting it to blow up. In the case of the Twin Towers, CNN and the BBC actually announced, in the case of the Building 7, CNN announced the destruction of that building in the morning, several hours before it came down. And in the case of the BBC, they announced it 20 minutes before it actually happened. They later apologized for this grievous error, citing the confusing events of the day. Something is going on here that needs to be investigated. Why can't we get governmental officials to investigate that? Every one of our CNN viewers today should be calling their congressmen and finding out, and senators, finding out why they're not investigating the worst mass murder in U.S. history and the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history. This is absolutely an extraordinary and unacceptable situation. And that's why we have 2,200 architects and engineers all about this, all over the country.
Richard Gage, what do you do for a living, and when did you come to believe what you believe?
Well, I founded Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth 8 years ago when I heard on the radio another researcher, David Ray Griffin, now the author of 10 books on the subject, who delves, by the way, into many of the other issues that the earlier callers have brought up outside of the World Trade Center, which is our narrower scope of investigation. So I had to dedicate myself to this all-important task because I found that most Americans are unaware of the evidence. It's on the internet, it's available, it makes sense, it's comprised from the video testimony, the video documentation, the eyewitness testimony, and it's not something that's made up. We are talking about evidence that's capable of being brought into a court and standing up against the process, the legal process. So let's, like the other caller said, let's get it going. Let's get some effort, as we are, in fact, pursuing various legal efforts, including against NIST themselves for fraudulent building reports.
And back to the National Institute of Standards and Technology report. This is the question. An emergency responder caught in World Trade Center 7 between the 6th and 8th floors said he heard 2 loud booms. Isn't that evidence that there was an explosion? NIST answer, the sound levels reported by all witnesses do not match the sound level of an explosion that would have been required to cause the collapse of the building.
Yeah, they actually say it would be a loud boom. You'd hear it for miles. But what they're referring to is high-energy explosives, which are normally used to bring down high-rises, like the old hotels in Las Vegas, which we've all seen, which Building 7 looks exactly like. But if they used thermite, an incendiary, which operates by heat instead of gas expansion and force and loud bangs and bright flashes, thermite instead would be much quieter, but there would still be some explosions heard, which in fact were heard.
Laura tweets in, what do the 9/11 truthers think happened in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon? Were they terrorist attacks?
Well, the researchers such as David Ray Griffin, who have looked into these matters, have found serious questions that also require a real investigation. And we're talking about a real investigation which offers immunity to bring forth witnesses, a subpoena power to force them to come forth, that looks at all the evidence with an open mind and with the scientific method. When we get such an investigation that we can actually trust, unlike the 9/11 Commission, by the way, which at least 2 of those members said that they were set up to fail by the Bush administration. One of them, Max Cleland, resigned, citing this as a national scandal. This is pretty extraordinary evidence. In fact, the attorney for the 9/11 Commission, John Farmer, cited that there was a decision at some point not to tell the American people the truth. The American people deserve the truth, Peter.
Mike, Safety Harbor, Florida. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN. First of all, Mr. Gage, I just want to give you the utmost compliment. You're a true American hero, and my hats are off to you. The very first caller was right when he listed the lengthy list of anomalies. The science for the destruction of the Twin Towers through explosives such as nanothermite is there. It's overwhelming. I personally have spent hundreds of hours of my personal time going over various information through Shanksville, the Pentagon, as well as the Twin Towers. Mike Rupert did an excellent presentation that you can pull up on YouTube where he actually goes through who would actually have benefited from the Twin Towers being brought down. He discusses topics of insider trading that went on that day through the various airlines. He talks about defense contracting. There's a lot of things that he touches on that have a lot of credibility. The one thing we need to stay away from is partisanship, because until we can prove who actually is involved, we should try to avoid dropping large names. Because it's counterproductive. Although I do believe the way you do, there's a lot of questions that the Bush administration needs to answer. My last question for you is, I was curious, have you personally or your family or anyone with the organization, have you had any threats, harm to your life or anything of that nature? And I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you very much for C-SPAN.
I'm delighted to say that I have not had any problems with threats, and I'm eternally grateful for that. I don't need that in my life. I'm just a normal, everyday architect and person who is very concerned about our country. As an American, I am deeply disturbed about the state of affairs when a deception on the scale of these 3 criminal-controlled demolitions can occur, and most Americans, certainly not all, fortunately, have been deceived. And most of our elected representatives are unwilling to tackle the the very serious issues before them, such as the finding of nanothermite, which the caller mentioned in the World Trade Center dust, small red-gray chips, tons of them all together, found by an independent team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen, with nanoparticles of iron oxide and aluminum powder embedded in them. Very clearly the most advanced materials made in extremely sophisticated Defense Department contracting laboratories. This material should not be found in all the World Trade Center dust, and yet there it is, and unexplained by the official analysis of the dust samples by R.J. Lee and the USGS, which, by the way, also found evidence of molten iron in the dust, which cannot be accounted for by the official story. Of course, jet fuel, office fires can't possibly account for temperatures exceeding 2,800 degrees. Office fires can't even get up to 1,800 degrees.
From the NIST report, some people have said that a failure at one column should not have produced a symmetrical fall like this one. What is NIST's answer to those assertions? World Trade Center 7's collapse, NIST says, viewed from the exterior, most videos were taken from the north, did appear to fall almost uniformly as a single unit. This occurred because the interior failures that took place did not cause the exterior framing to fail until the final stages of the building collapse. The interior floor framing and columns collapsed downward and pulled away from the exterior frame. There were clues that internal damage was taking place prior to the downward movement of the exterior frame.
Here's another one of NIST's cute answers to an extremely difficult question. You cannot have the interior of a 47-story, 40,000-ton structural steel frame fail without pulling in the side of the building and causing massive warpage on the exterior perimeter structural steel system. It can't happen. They're talking, once again, in their computer models, which betrays their own theory, that we have 400 structural steel connections that have to fail in their computer models in order to get that interior to fail, and then the exterior. We don't even have massive window breakage on the exterior. It can't happen. In fact, what does happen is the penthouse drops, the main penthouse, a half a second prior to the overall. So just half a second prior, the penthouse drops, then the overall building drops again. How fast? Free fall acceleration. That fast, 7 seconds. Total structural shattering of the entire structural steel system, beam from column almost. So this can't happen unless all of those are compromised. See, when you have a pile driver that's driving the rest of the building down, it's doing work. In this case, it's falling at free fall, meaning all of its energy is transferred to kinetic energy or motion. There's no energy left to do any work, such as driving the rest of the building down to the ground. That work has to have come from another force. Again, that force is most likely thermite incendiaries, for which we have the evidence in the rubble pile.
John, Jonesboro, Georgia, go ahead with your question or comment for Richard Gage.
Yes, Mr. Gage, I have a couple of questions. Where did you get your degree in architect? Also, what engineering degrees do you hold? And I would like to personally know when your book is out. I've been a steel worker for 50 years, and I can assure you that all the centrifugal force and the downfall and this and that, if you put enough weight on a building, it's like, you got a paper building. You drop a 5-pound weight on it and see film crush it. So
yeah, well, I appreciate that. I went to you.
Just a second, Mr. Gage.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
Appreciate that. I went to the University of Southern California in 1986. I had my degree and licensed in 1988. A member of the American Institute of Architects, and we have more than 70, I think 80 now, structural engineers signed on. In fact, there are some high-rise structural engineers. There's several, at least a dozen, high-rise architects, experienced architects in these buildings that have attested to the fact that you cannot have a 40,000-ton structural steel system and not a paper building fall at free fall. I mean, we're talking about 80 columns. In order to have this building fall symmetrically, all 80 columns have to be severed virtually at once. You tell me as a steel worker how that happens, and I'll tip my hat to you.
Daniel, Atlanta. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Daniel Bland. I joined the Army 3 months after 9/11, a decision that nearly cost me my life when a rocket-propelled grenade impacted 15 meters behind me. So first off, I just want to say Mr. Gage and the 2,200 other architects and engineers that have signed this petition are heroes in my book. I'd also like to give a props to C-SPAN for bringing light to this important information. And I'd like to end with a question for Peter. Peter, it's apparent that you've been given these talking points from NIST, and you stated earlier you thought that their response was transparent, which to me seemed kind of a dance around the point Mr. Gage made about NIST refusing to release the input data used in their computer models. I would love to hear your comment and how you think that's transparent and how it serves the interest of truth and finding out what really happened so that we can end these wars that are killing innocent people around the world to this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Mr. Gage, 2,200 architects and engineers signed on. How many architects and engineers are there registered with AIA and these other groups? How many are in the U.S.?
What we've found is that most of them, and I think there's about 80,000 in the American Institute of Architects, most every one of them, first of all, are unfamiliar with the evidence, particularly World Trade Center Building 7. And this is the third worst structural failure in modern history, and yet architects and engineers are not familiar with it. So when we travel, we get them in our audiences, and just like lay people in the audience, they end up agreeing with us by an overwhelming majority. I mean, like 90 to 100% of them when they see this building coming down, which, by the way, they can see also on our website, ae911truth.org. That's ae911truth.org, on which people can see the building coming down, and of course in the exact manner of classic controlled demolition. So the problem is, architects are expressing opinions, a lot of them, and engineers, before they see the evidence. Those opinions are uninformed. You have to see the evidence to have an informed opinion. When they do, they end up agreeing with us. I think that's extremely important. It's also telling, why are they not informed? Why hasn't other media outlets such as CNN, MSNBC, CBS, etc., shown the World Trade Center Building 7 to the American people? Why haven't the American Society of Civil Engineers and the American Institute of Architects educated their own professionals about the third worst structural failure in modern history? What?
Okay, let's end it there. We took a long time to show what's happening here because it's so important for today, but I think he's covered most of it there. We have another clip that I don't think we'll play because of time, but it's important to understand that the last point that he made there, that it's been covered up. Why? And it's still being covered up. I think that's probably the the main point there that he is making, that it is still being covered up to this day. The obvious truth is that the official story of 9/11 taught in schools to the rising generation, not just these architect schools and not advanced engineering schools, but from the ground up, is a bald-faced lie. And any lie that is known to be a lie but allowed to be officially taught to children as truth is not only scandalous but criminal. So in this clip that we're not going to play, but if we'd had time we'd play, we'd see a little part of the technical details that the man, Mr. Gage here, was referring to, that actually implies that the official story is lies. It's abundantly evident that that's the case. But no matter how conclusive, no matter how compelling the technical evidence might prove to be, there's always opposition that will rise up against it. And as long as there are those who have the most influence in society's opinions, such as these network news outlets that he was ticking off there, they will always be able to leverage that ignorance and ignore the evidence or spin it in some way, thus delaying the inevitable emergence of the truth for many years. And so that's what we've seen. But this unfortunate reality explains why it took the A&E for 9/11 Truth 13 years of unrelenting effort to win the privilege to tell their story on a national network. That is just unbelievable. Don't you think, Roy or Andrew or anybody? Do we have any written questions coming in? We forgot to tell people. Yeah.
My experience with it is we had down here, because I was an iron worker and I put up a lot, we put up a lot of steel, me and Bobby, and when you look at it on the base of the steel, steel building, there's no way that it could have collapsed. There is no way unless there had help, because when we had Comanche power plant burn, caught on fire inside and that's where the conveyor comes up, and it's a big conveyor, brings up the coal up into the power plant. Up into the and what happened was that conveyor caught on fire. Guy had a fire extinguisher there, and somehow it sparked, and that stuff really lights up and really burns hot. And it burned all the way up to the top, and it stopped. It burned him up to a crisp, but when it got to the top, I helped tear out all that steel up there. It was twisted and warped, but it never collapsed.
Huh.
And it was interesting because it was all...
I bet you didn't see any molten steel either, huh?
No, it just warps it, and it totally would warp it, and but it didn't come down. And this was the top of a building where this huge conveyor comes up to it and drops the coal up there. And that coal went all the way, it was all full of coal, it caught on fire and went all the way up there, caught that on fire, but it went out, and then, of course, what was left is just twisted iron. And it never collapsed. It never did anything, and that was 200 feet in the air.
Well, I worked on that station. I didn't know that they had that fire. But there's been many, on YouTube, which is really the reason why it's replacing these networks. These networks are just dying because everybody knows they're lying now, and everybody knows that you have to work to sort it out, but the best source of truth is YouTube, and it shows their bald-faced lying and manipulation of the truth, so people don't go there. But there's been a lot of office fires or building fires. I saw one on YouTube. It was overseas, and the whole building was engulfed in unbelievable flame. That nothing was left but the steel framework, and it still didn't come down. It buckled a lot and everything, like you said, but it didn't it didn't collapse.
Well, yeah, you see especially when we got a column is the size of a friggin' house. It's going to go up from the base all the way up to the top of that, 50 stories or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was way up there.
Those, how big do you think the base is? It's the size of a friggin' house. That's the corner. It's a foundation. It's got to be strong. It gets smaller when it gets to the top, but that's still not that small.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, did you have any observations that you would like to make?
Oh yeah, Roy, that's a pretty good story. You gotta make YouTube video, man. That's a witness right there to real life happening. That's cool. So yeah, I got a question here from Christy. And Christy Smith, she says, what is the best way to invite people to dig deeper or to have some curiosity about 9/11? You have any tips on basically waking people up to 9/11? Because, she thinks, and we all think, that is a catalyst to waking people up to our awful situation.
Well, that's a very good question, and we appreciate Christy. She is a regular listener. We got to get her to come on when she's not working and join us here because she has such great questions. But that's a really tough one to answer. That's the whole reason why we're on the air. We are trying to help people understand that the two go together. This exposing the reality that is behind the screen. Remember the Wizard of Oz when the dog Toto pulls the curtain back and you see the old man in there saying, don't watch me, watch the screen. Watch the screen, and so that's maybe one way. There isn't a single way that works for everybody, of course, but though getting them to understand that they need to think about their lives and to take the time to meditate, take the time to understand, and not just wake up in the morning and go through the same routine, get ready, go to work, talk about, have all the fun things that they want to talk about, and then come home and turn on the television and watch the news, and then go about doing their normal routines, and they never take time to understand that things are not that straightforward in life. They're not always straightforward. We have to actually take the time to meditate about the big, deep questions that life brings us, and if we do, then we're more likely to understand the truth. But then even that doesn't guarantee it. So I really don't. I don't know. I've tried every way possible, from being philosophic like that to actually. I remember going to my stake he wasn't my stake president, he was my neighbor, but they moved away and he became a stake president, and then twice actually, and so I went over to tell him once I was awake. I said, do you have some time? I want to show you something. And I went over and showed him that 9/11 BBC clip on Building 7. Do you happen to have that, Andrew? Did you find it?
Yes, sir. I got the 9/11, the BBC clip. I got
clip of Building 7 before it came down.
Yep, I got it. I got it right here. It's a
All
report.
right, let's play that, because I went over there to his house and I said, I got to show you. We went and sat down next to his computer. His wife was in there too. I said, you got to see this, and I showed him that, and then we discussed it. And while I'm telling the story while you get it going, so go ahead, Andrew, and start it, and I'll stop as soon as I see it come up.
Okay.
But the thing is that he was just amazed, and his wife was amazed. And then, of course, I went on and I showed him other things, the Neil Harrit an analysis of the dust that shows the uninitiated or the unused, I guess that's what you call it, unburned nanothermite that was not available to just the normal construction trade. It was only available to the military. It's a very highly technologically sophisticated substance that they found.
Nanothermite.
Yeah. Have you
And
got the video up?
Oh
Let's run that video of the World Trade Center. It looks like it's coming up. You will see here what happens when BBC is reporting this on the day of 9/11, and behind the reporter, you're able. Go ahead and start it. Behind the reporter, you can see the.
Only a few hundred yards away from where the.
Okay, here it is. Yeah.
And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attack. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York, behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier today, because of, course, the dreadful collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But New York, very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly. And we know that down there near the World Trade Center, there are 3 schools that are being turned into triage centers for emergency treatment. And I know that over in New York Harbor, where the famous Statue of
they closed the feed down.
Oh
gosh, because it was just minutes away from the scheduled demolition.
Couldn't comprehend it. I mean, it sounded too far-fetched. I was wondering what it felt like for you being in Manhattan. Well, unfortunately, I think you lost the line with Jane Stanley in Manhattan.
Unfortunately. Wow, thank you for playing that, Andrew. To answer Christy's question, how could anybody with any kind of ability to think would not wake up after seeing that? I mean, to me, that's it. If they can't wake up after seeing that, there is no hope, at least no immediate hope. Maybe after years, it'll dawn on them. I don't know.
Hey, Christy had a follow-up question. She said, "Have you had?" It doesn't sound like it, but is there? How much success have you had in waking people up?
Not much.
Yeah.
What I do though is like we do on this show. I couple it with the gospel. I try to show them how what has happened it fits in with the prophecies and the restoration of the gospel. And I have had some success that way, but I have run into a buzzsaw trying to get church leaders to understand, trying to get neighbors to understand and wake up, and especially trying to get my family to wake up and understand. It's just I've given up. Really, I shouldn't maybe, but I figured it was better rather than trying to wake them up. It was better for me to put something together like this that expounds the truth out over the internet, and hopefully we can wake up people that way. How many of you managed to wake up, Andrew?
Not, I mean, of course, you can't do it on your own. You got to use, like you said, I mean, especially if they are an LDS Mormon, then the scriptures, the Book of Mormon reveals these secret societies very clearly. And you think it'd be easier with Mormons, but it's actually not.
That's right.
But yeah, a few. But yeah, it's tough. I would say one thing is that you don't get angry and yell. And I probably did that for like the first 5 years, and that was so only this year have I stopped yelling.
How can you not understand?
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, I don't know if I've stopped yelling actually, but sometimes I'm working on it. So yeah, it's not great, but you just got to keep going because this reality that they live in is a dream world that we all live. But we all were sleeping, we were dreaming.
That's right. But so anyway, that's I wish I had a better answer for Christy, but I think what she's doing in teaching the Constitution is a really good way. You mentioned the other day that she teaches classes on the Constitution, and when people start to understand what these people are trying to destroy, it wasn't just trying to destroy those buildings, they're trying to destroy America, and it began with those buildings. And so looking back, it's clear that the implications of the truth concerning 9/11 are immense, extending into every American institution, into every American's life, including the institution of the church and the lives of its members. I want to play a clip now of President Hinckley's talk given in conference soon after the 9/11 talk, or 9/11 attack, so we can kind of get a perspective here. If you would bring that one up and just mute it, I'll bring up the audio part of it, and we can do it that way. And like we did here a minute, and I'll leave you to try to synchronize them. You can pause. I'll start this one after
now.
Doug. Before you get that one going, Andrew, and then you can slow it down. Yeah, Roy.
When you talk, I can't see the screen because it goes to real small, and so every time you talked, I didn't even see that. What happened with did that building collapse in that thing in the show?
Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't see it. It's because you're on iPad. I think what you have to do, Roy, is when he's playing something, is to click on Andrew's little film strip square down there. See? And then that will keep, no matter who talks, that will keep the focus on him, and he's the one that's showing the video.
Okay.
But I don't know if you can do that on the iPad or not, because I've never watched this show on iPad. I don't know.
Oh, I can do it on iPad because I can do myself that way, and only my picture comes up.
Okay, so click on his picture. Like right now, you should click on his picture, and you'll see President Hinckley. There should be a white box that goes around.
Well, I see his. It's all skewed. I mean, I can't see Hinckley. Because it's
but the point is that you be able. It doesn't switch to me when I talk, right?
No.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. Okay, I'm going to start this then, and you try to sync it up, Andrew.
We're at war. Great forces have been mobilized and will continue to be. Political alliances are being forged. We do not know how long this conflict will last. We do not know what it will cost in lives and treasure. We do not know the manner in which it will be carried out. It could impact the work of the church in various ways. Our national economy has been made to suffer. It was already in trouble, and this has compounded the problem. Many are losing their employment. Among our own people, this could affect welfare needs and also the tithing of the church. It could affect our missionary program. We are now a global organization. We have members in more than 150 nations. Administering this vast worldwide program could conceivably become more difficult. Those of us who are American citizens stand solidly with the President of our nation. The terrible forces of evil must be confronted and held accountable for their actions. This is not a matter of Christian against Muslim. I am pleased that food was dropped to the hungry people of a targeted nation. We value our Muslim neighbors across the world and hope that those who live by the tenets of their faith will not suffer. I ask particularly that our own people do not become a party in any way to the persecution of the innocent. Rather, let us be friendly and helpful, protective and supportive. It is the terrorist organizations that must be ferreted out and brought down. We of this church know something of such groups. The Book of Mormon speaks of the Gadianton robbers, a vicious, oath-bound, and secret organization bent on evil and destruction.
Let's pause it here for a minute, Andrew. I'm sorry, but let me add to the. I needed to preface this a little bit. This was a month after 9/11. This is from 2001 that he spoke, and so what we see is that he didn't understand either. He didn't understand a lot of things. He's in the old paradigm where, not understanding that our government had become a captured operation and had actually perpetrated the attack in order to have a 9/11, a Pearl Harbor type provocation in order to go to war, presumably against these terrorists that he's saying need to be ferreted out. See, that's what we all believed back then. That's what we thought was happening. They would have to ferret out these terrorists, and we could, protect ourselves, and we need to support the government, especially the president, in going after him. Of course, what he didn't realize then is he didn't go after the terrorists. He went after Iraq. That didn't have anything to do with the terrorists, and so on and so forth. We all know the history, but it's important to understand the context. I forgot to mention, this is just a month after 9/11. So you can see how and we're going to see more of it, how he was not able to understand either. I mean, just any more than the regular person on the street was able to understand, even though he's the prophet. But we're going to be able to see how his wisdom is so fundamental and how his vision was so right on, because he could see the eternal framework, the eternal truths he knew about, and those don't change. And that's the important thing to understand out of this clip here, I think. So, all right, let's go on.
In their day, they did all in their power by whatever means available to bring down the church, to woo the people with sophistry, and to take control of the society. We see the same thing in the present situation. We are people of peace. We are followers of the Christ who was and is the Prince of Peace. But there are times when we must stand up for right and decency, for freedom and civilization, just as Moroni rallied his people in his day to the defense of their wives, their children, and the cause of liberty. On the Larry King television broadcast the other night, I was asked what I think of those who, in the name of their religion, carry out such infamous activities. I replied, Religion offers no shield for wickedness, for evil, for those kinds of things. The God in whom I believe does not foster this kind of action. He is a God of mercy. He is a God of love. He is a God of peace and reassurance. And I look to him in times such as this as a comfort and a source of strength. Members of the church in this and other nations are now involved with many others in a great international undertaking. On television, we see those of the military leaving their loved ones, knowing not whether they will return. It is affecting the homes of our people. Unitedly as a church, we must get on our knees and invoke the powers of the Almighty in behalf of those who will carry the burdens of this campaign. No one knows how long it will last. No one knows precisely where it will be fought. No one knows what it may entail before it is over. We've launched an undertaking, the size and nature of which we cannot see at this time. Occasions of this kind pull us up sharply to a realization that life is fragile, peace is fragile, civilization itself is fragile. The economy is particularly vulnerable. We have been counseled again and again concerning self-reliance, concerning debt, concerning thrift. So many of our people are heavily in debt for things that are not entirely necessary. When I was a young man, my father counseled me to build a modest home, sufficient for the needs of my family, and make it beautiful and attractive and pleasant and secure. He counseled me to pay off the mortgage as quickly as I could, so that come what may, there would be a roof over the heads of my wife and children. I was reared on that kind of doctrine. I urge you as members of this church to get free of debt where possible, and to have a little laid aside against a rainy day. We cannot provide against every contingency, but we can provide against many contingencies. Let the present situation remind us that this we should do. As we have been continuously counseled for more than 60 years, let us have some food set aside that would sustain us for a time in case of need. But let us not panic nor go to extremes. Let us be prudent in every respect. And above all, my brothers and sisters, let us move forward with faith in the living God and his beloved Son. Great are the promises concerning this land of America. We are told unequivocally that it is a choice land, and whatsoever nation shall possess it shall be free from bondage and from captivity and from all other nations under heaven, if they will but serve the God of the land, who is Jesus Christ. This is the crux of the entire matter: obedience to the commandments of God. The Constitution under which we live, and which has not only blessed us, but has become a model for other constitutions, is our God-inspired national safeguard, ensuring freedom and liberty, justice and equality before the law. I do not know what the future holds. I do not wish to sound negative, but I wish to remind you of the warnings of Scripture and the teachings of the prophets, which we have had constantly before us.
Okay, there's a second part. While you cue that up, I just want to again make the comment, and we see the paradigm. See, he didn't understand. From his generation, there was no captured operation. They didn't realize that the Gadianton robbers had taken over our government. They should have. If they would have had the tower, they would have known it for generations. They would have seen it coming, and they would have been made ready. But you see, they're asleep in that sense. Even the prophet of the church here is asleep in that sense, because he didn't understand that the enemy, because he couldn't see him without the tower. If they would have built the tower, they would have placed, he would have been on top of the tower. He would have seen the enemy. He would have understood. Oh man, who knows what a different outcome would have been. But see, he's taken by surprise like everybody else, not seeing the enemy, who is there really to break down the very constitution that he's talking about. But he thinks they're on theirs. You know, that it's a we, like the World War II, we'll get together and in faith in God we'll destroy this attack, the attackers that have attacked our freedom. Remember how back in those days they were talking about they hate us, the Islamists hate us because of our freedom. See, we're free and they're not. Remember that? It used to go out. It was such garbage. They hate us because they think that we're worshiping the wrong God, and they have been co-opted by the same people who have captured our government into being their dupes for, and they're more than willing to sweep us off this land. But the whole reason that God is permitting us to be swept off this land is that we're not serving the God of this land, who is Jesus Christ. And he said, just as the president quoted there, that this is a land of freedom and we wouldn't be brought down into captivity as long as iniquity doesn't abound. But it abounds, and so this is what we're seeing happening now. Are we ready to move on to the second part of that sermon? Andrew?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Can you see my screen? We good?
Yeah, I see your screen, but I see just the end of the last clip. Let's start the second clip on Ezra Taft. I mean on President Hinckley.
No, this is part 2.
It is?
This should be.
Well, start it. I'm going to start the audio here.
I cannot forget the great lesson of Pharaoh's dream of the fat and lean kine, and of the full and withered stalks of corn. I cannot dismiss from my mind the grim warnings of the Lord as set forth in the 24th chapter of Matthew. I am familiar, as are you, with the declarations of modern revelation that the time will come when the earth will be cleansed and there will be indescribable distress.
Okay, we're not seeing the. You have to maybe stop the share and restart it or whatever you have to do, because we're just seeing the end of the first clip.
Okay. Let me. Okay, I'm gonna stop it and then reshare it here.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're pretty on sync there, but I guess I was just seeing it.
Yeah.
How's that?
With weeping and mourning and lamentation.
Now you can sync it.
Now, I do not wish to be an alarmist. I do not wish to be a prophet of doom. I am optimistic. I do not believe that the time is here when an all-consuming calamity will overtake us. I earnestly pray that it may not. There is so much of the Lord's work yet to be done. We and our children after us must do it. I can assure you that we who are responsible for the management of the affairs of the church will be prudent and careful, as we have tried to be in the past. The tithes of the church are sacred. They are appropriated in the manner set forth by the Lord himself. We have become a very large and complex organization. We carry on many extensive and costly programs, but I can assure you that we will not exceed our income. We will not place the church in debt. We will tailor what we do to the resources that are available. How grateful I am for the law of tithing. It is the Lord's law of finance. It is set forth in a few words in the 119th section of the Doctrine and Covenants. It comes of His wisdom. To every man and woman, to every boy and girl, to every child in this church who pays an honest tithing, be it large or small, I express gratitude for the faith that is in your hearts. I remind you, and those who do not pay tithing but who should, that the Lord has promised marvelous blessings. He has also promised that he that is tithed shall not be burned at his coming. I express appreciation to those who pay a fast offering. This costs the giver nothing other than going without 2 meals a month. It becomes the backbone of our welfare program designed to assist those in distress. Now, all of us know that war, contention, hatred, suffering of the worst kind are not new. The conflict we see today is but another expression of the conflict that began with the war in heaven. I quote from the book of Revelation, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ." That must have been a terrible conflict. The forces of evil were pitted against the forces of good. The great deceiver, the son of the morning, was defeated and banished, and took with him a third of the hosts of heaven. The book of Moses and the book of Abraham shed further light concerning this great contest. Satan would have taken from man his agency and taken unto himself all credit and honor and glory. Opposed to this was the plan of the Father, which the Son said he would fulfill, under which he came to earth and gave his life to atone for the sins of mankind. From the day of Cain to the present, the adversary has been the great mastermind of the terrible conflicts that have brought so much suffering. Treachery and terrorism began with him, and they will continue until the Son of God returns to rule and reign with peace and righteousness among the sons and daughters of God. Through centuries of time, men and women, so very, very many, have lived and died. Some may die in the conflict that lies ahead. To us, and we bear solemn testimony of this, death will not be the end. There is life beyond this as surely as there is life here. Through the great plan which became the very essence of the war in heaven, men shall go on living. Job asked, "If a man die, shall he live again?" He replied, "For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another. Now, brothers and sisters, we must do our duty, whatever that duty might be. Peace may be denied for a season. Some of our liberties may be curtailed. We may be inconvenienced. We may even be called on to suffer in one way or another. But God, our eternal Father, will watch over this nation and all of the civilized world who look to Him. He has declared, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Our safety lies in repentance. Our strength comes of obedience to the commandments of God. Let us be prayerful. Let us pray for righteousness. Let us pray for the forces of good. Let us reach out to help men and women of goodwill, whatever their religious persuasion and wherever they live. Let us stand firm against evil, both at home and abroad. Let us live worthy of the blessings of heaven, reforming our lives where necessary, and looking to Him, the Father of us all. He has said, "Be still and know that I am God." Are these perilous times? They are. But there is no need to fear. We can have peace in our hearts and peace in our homes. We can be an influence for good in this world, every one of us. May the God of heaven, the Almighty, bless us, help us as we walk our various ways in the uncertain days that lie ahead. May we look to Him with unfailing faith. May we worthily place our reliance on His beloved Son, who is our great Redeemer, whether it be in life or in death, is my prayer. In His holy name, even the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so really impressive because...
My beloved brethren and sisters.
Sorry, there was a little bit of tail end on that. But anyway, he says here we must do our duty, whatever that duty may be. Peace may be denied for a season. Some of our liberties may be curtailed. We may be inconvenienced. We may even be called on to suffer in one way or another. But God, our eternal Father, will watch over this nation and all the civilized world who look to Him. He has declared, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Our safety lies in repentance. Our strength comes to obedience, comes of or from obedience to the commandments of God. There is no need to fear. Of course, the implication being that if we keep the commandments of God, there is no need to fear. But how? See, he didn't see, this is the point I'm trying to make. He didn't understand, and none of us understood what the real situation was, but yet his counsel, his guidance was right on. I mean, how inspirational is that? You know, because though he couldn't see everything, what he could see was the most important. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, I thought it was very good when he said, yeah, he talked about whatever that may be. He didn't say, oh, go and join the army. I mean, he could have said that and he didn't. And so it was good counsel. The only thing that I would say is that that he was saying that the liberties will be curtailed, and he was right on in seeing that would happen. The problem is that he should say that those liberties are God-given and they should never be curtailed no matter what threat, because that's what the Constitution guarantees, and so that is what he left out. But other than that, it was very good advice at the end.
Yeah, you're right on, because in another talk, in fact, I found this talk when I was looking for the one that I remember, where he said, yeah, we have to give up, there are times when we have to give up our liberty for protection or something to that effect. That's why I wanted to find it. But here he is his first reference to it, but I guess later he actually expanded on that a little bit, and that was very, very unfortunate. But that was because the tower is down. The tower was never built. If he'd have been up on the tower, he would have, if the tower had been built, that would have never come to pass. He would have understood that. Did you have something to add, Roy? Roy? Well, okay. It's clear that he didn't know what we know now. Of course, he couldn't have. But I wanted to read this comment by a YouTube commenter that he put under this video 9 months ago. He says, quote, "I love this man, but it seems he too was deceived by the clever conspiracy, secret combination. Only Christ is perfect and impossible to deceive, in paren, just like I was deceived about who the real terrorists are. Those in the government, including Bush, who orchestrated terrorists and terrorists, quote unquote, for hire to do their work and deceive us, even to giving up our liberty for fake safety, quote unquote, just what Moroni warned us to awaken to so we can reject it, as we read in Ether chapter 8 verses 16 through 24, end quote. Well, yeah, see, this guy said it really well. It's easy to see that the prophet didn't understand what was happening any more than the rest of us did. But it's also easy to see how his wisdom was guided by the eternal truths that he did know. His counsel was wise, not misguided. His judgment was sound, not foolish. So we may have known the truth of the what, the who, or we may have not known the truth of the what, which we just saw the engineers explain, and the who, which we have later found out that was doing all of this, and the why, as we've read about their plans to take down the United States of America and in order to dominate with a full spectrum dominance the entire world. But even though he didn't know these things, his trust in the government and the good intentions of its leaders might have been misplaced, but he was not wrong. Now, I remember when I was a missionary in Chile, and he came down there. He wasn't the president of the church at that time. He was an apostle, and I think he was a counselor, actually, to President Kimball. I don't remember which now. But it might have even been President David O. McKay that he was, no, I don't know, I forget. But anyway, he's down there in Chile, and he's trying to find out whether they should rebuild the shortwave radio station of the church that burned down, see, because it reached places down there in South America. And so he was, all the missionaries were together there, and he was asking us these questions about how many used short waves, because they needed to know whether it would be worthwhile to rebuild that station. And the thing about the new technology came up, and I had just bought a cassette recorder at that time, and I told him about that, and he asked me how much I had paid for it, and I said $100, and then he kind of chided me. Well, you got ripped off, he said. Well, I bought it at the BYU store before I left when it was on sale, you know. So it was a good price at that time, but when I bought it, but this was a year or two later when he comes down there, and by that time the prices of the things had fallen considerably, right? And the size of it had fallen considerably, and I think that's what he's thinking, is that they could distribute a lot cheaper these messages that were going out over shortwave on cassettes if people only had cassette players. But they wouldn't have very many down there if they cost $100 a piece. Well, he didn't understand that I had bought it several years and that the previously, and that the price had dropped dramatically. And but he embarrassed the heck out of me, and it was because he didn't understand. And but I loved him, just as this guy says that he loved him. And of course, I never said anything. I took it on the chin. But it was important to understand that these guys are not infallible. That we've kind of grown up with the idea that they understand everything. Well, they don't. I'm sorry, but they are put there to guide us and direct us and give us the inspirational guidance that the Lord wants us to have. And so now we see that very clearly. They may not understand it, but now we see on this date, I know we're almost out of time, but Paul Craig Roberts wrote a piece that is on Infowars.com, and I want to read it in part because it's so important to understand the reality that we face now. And he writes, quote, "The tragedy of September 11th, 2001 goes far beyond the deaths of those who died in the towers and the deaths of firefighters and first responders who succumbed to illnesses caused by inhalation of toxic dust," which of course they now deny them medical and have denied them medical attention, medical coverage for that very thing, to add insult to injury. But that's my words. But for 13 years, going on with Roberts, for 13 years, a new generation of Americans has been born into the 9/11 myth that has been used to create the American welfare/police state. The corrupt Bush and Obama regimes used 9/11 to kill, maim, dispossess, and displace millions of Muslims in 7 countries, none of whom had anything whatsoever to do with 9/11. A generation of Americans has been born into disdain and distrust of Muslims. A generation of Americans has been born into a police state in which privacy and constitutional protections no longer exist. A generation of Americans has been born into continuous warfare while needs of citizens go unmet. A generation of Americans has been born into a society in which truth is replaced with the endless repetition of falsehoods. End quote. Now, you put that up in context and in contrast with what the prophet said and things that he didn't know were coming, but he warned us that they were coming in general and gave us the wise counsel not to fall into that trap of hate and for those that were in government positions to go along with the jeopardy of the Constitution, jeopardizing our Constitution. Just contemplating the 9/11 myth, as Roberts puts it here, is to stare ourselves in the face where we see how gullible, how naive, how hedonistic the masses of Americans are. In many ways, it's a measure of our stumbling block, of the awful blindness of our minds, the stiffness of our necks, and the hardness of our hearts. We need to wake up and understand and break out of this sleep, to awake to a sense of our awful situation, as the Lord said, and not suffer that this horrible evil get above us. That may be so is my earnest prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Hey, Doug, real quick, can we do like a 2-second bonus here? I got another question that came in.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Okay, great. That was really good words you had there at the end, especially pointing out the fact that Gordon B. Hinckley said for us to be peaceful, and that was hard. I don't think I was. I know that lots of people I knew weren't, down with Muslims and all that. So that was really good advice, and that's something that us being awake now look back and it's like, yeah, it's just like I look in the mirror, you're deceived, and so I was, and so I can't criticize too much. But the question has to do with what's going on now. Now this comes from my father. This is
really
Dr. Richard
cool.
Brad. Yeah, yeah. So he is he's been waking up slow process just like all of us, and he's doing a pretty good job getting those things prepared that he's supposed to, so that's really cool. Let's see here. So his question is, what is, and this has to do with ISIS, so what is Obama talking about when he uses the term threat of ISIS and that the U.S. will go after anyone who threatens us? And he's saying this on with the background that I'm in his ear all the time, saying, hey, ISIS is funded by the U.S. government. So he just wants you to decipher kind of what Obama was saying. Were you able to hear anything that he said?
No, I don't listen to him anymore because he's just a liar. I'm sorry, it's not a part of the generation that I grew up, let alone the generation of President Hinckley and probably your father. But the man is a liar. He's a deceiver. He was put there on purpose, and you can't believe a word. You can tell he's a liar if his lips are moving. And there's lots of examples of that, but he's such a hypocrite, and that's why in the Book of Mormon, the Lord includes hypocrisy. He says that he will take the fullness of the gospel away from the Gentiles if they reject it, and at the same time are full of murders and abominations and lyings and robbery and hypocrisy. And that's where it is. The hypocrisy is unbelievable among these people who are now running our government, and we can see it. There's instance after instance of where they, if you know the truth, you can see their lies and the hypocrisy, from false flags to, this is something your father's probably not prepared to know, but the man, Obama, was intent on exploding nuclear weapons above the United States for an EMP attack that would correspond to what they thought was going to happen with the solar discharge at that time, and so that it would have been hidden. And if it had succeeded in doing that, but he didn't, thanks to some loyal generals and an admiral who foiled his plans. But most people, of course, would not believe that happened. But then he quickly dissembled, and over the network news we see that. Now, I don't want to scare your dad away, and he might think I'm an absolute idiot, but that's the truth.
I have told him the craziest, the darkest. He's heard it all, and he is an open-minded, very open-minded guy. And as far as prepping, so I would answer my dad, and I think he's listening. I would say that the threat that Obama talks about when in ISIS, well, first off, Obama works for the banks. He works for that establishment, this New World Order, these secret combinations. And so it is to perpetuate war and to eventually destroy all people. And Doug is right that he did plan on detonating an EMP nuke above the atmosphere to take out all of our electricity. And was it him? He gets a text from a bankster and then he does it. I don't know, but that's when he talks about a threat. He's talking about let's increase military spending and let's make sure we have perpetual war, no matter what.
He wants boots on the ground back in Iraq. That's what he wants because they're going after Syria. This whole thing about the EMP came down during that time when he was trying to get trying to go after Syria, and he got stopped because enough American people understood what was happening, and they actually stopped it. But you can understand he's talking about the threat of ISIS over there when he has completely opened up the border so that it is like there is no border. In Isaiah it says they moved the borders of the people so that they could, so ISIS can come in here to our country and start the same thing that they're doing over there here in our country. And it is so wide open. Alex Jones and his company went down there. They showed the gates where nobody was around them in these fences. And of course, we know all about how not only is the border open, but they're coming across this facilitated by government money. And to the tune of, it'd take another program to go through all of it, but he can look that up, right?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks. Perfect.
Yeah, so there's so much we could say on that, but thank your dad for that question. I really love these questions coming in. I don't know how they're coming in yet, but eventually we're going to figure that out. By the phone.
Yeah.
Okay. There's supposed to be a way that they could come into our hangout here, but I haven't seen it yet. And so anyway, let's. I gotta go. I got another appointment. Let's wish everybody a good day, and as always, my prayer is that the Lord's choicest blessings will be with us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.